You're listening to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall on CJAD 800.
Welcome back to Montreal Now. Justine McIntyre here in the studio with Sarah Deshaies, and it is time to speak with James Mennie from the Montreal Gazette. James, hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. Listen, I think this is just so ironic that this news came out today because yesterday you and I were talking about there being more women getting involved in politics in Quebec, and we were going back and forth over that and then talking also about people dropping out of politics more and more because of the climate, the difficult climate in which politicians have to work these days. And now we hear that Joël Boutin, who was sort of a jewel in the crown of François Legault, anyway, an up-and-coming politician for sure, elected in a by-election in 2019. And it's been all over the news all day long that she's announced her resignation. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I thought it was cool. I found out today she's a licensed pilot, which I thought was pretty neat.
It's pretty cool.
But the thing that gets me though is if you sort of look overall at departures either from cabinet or from caucus, it's usually women when it comes to the CAQ. And it's interesting. I mean, you see all these sort of ad hoc reports that are saying, well, it was an open secret. She was miffed that she wasn't named to cabinet and so on and so forth. She maintains that she was only able to see her kids every other week because of her job as an MNA. She has accepted what apparently is a really, really sweet job in the private sector. All that said, it's even on its own, it would have been a little awkward in terms of the optics for the CAQ government. But man, oh man, in Jean Talon, it's going to be very, very interesting. I thought the by-elections, a lot of us think by-elections, well, they don't really count. They're going to send the government a message, and it's not really going to stick around. And, to a certain extent, in my opinion, the death warrant for the Quebec Liberal Party was sort of two-thirds written by the by-election results in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne to replace Dominique Anglade. The Quebec Solidaire won in that one. And here in Jean Talon, the geography and the politics are clashing. This is a Quebec City riding, one of several that had supported the CAQ, certainly had listened to the CAQ's election promise. We're going to build you a highway tunnel between Quebec City and Lévis, and they just dropped
the third link.
They just dropped it like a hot potato and said, well, it's not a big deal. We're going to make it for public transit and whatever. And people were actually angry. And now, as of July 31st, we'll have, 6 months for a by-election to be called. It's going to happen in the fall. And one can only hope that M. Legault is going to be able to turn around his party's reputation, at least in the Quebec City area. But once again, I'm not entirely sure that they're going to be able to pull it off. That said, I'm equally uncertain that the polling that for the moment shows the PQ to be leading in the Quebec City area may necessarily prove to be true once the ballots are counted. I would not count out Quebec Solidaire in that riding.
Really? Okay.
And remember, with all due respect to the Parti Québécois and its leader, Monsieur Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, the reason they have had that bump in the polls is that their leader has essentially not, succeeded in not walking into a wall or setting himself on fire accidentally. He's been, by comparison, he's looking pretty good. He's sounding pretty lucid, and I think that's really added to the allure of the PQ. But once again, is it a test for the CAQ? Yes. It's also a test for the PQ, certainly a test for the Liberals. And what people forget as well is Jean Talon, up until 2019, Jean Talon riding had voted for the Quebec Liberal Party since 1966. So Joël Boutin basically knocked over a Liberal stronghold. Once again, given what happened in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne, will the Liberals even be able to mount a capable campaign to try and take it back? I think they'll. At this point, I think it's going to be lucky if they just show up for the by-election. But all things considered, there is a lot at stake here in terms of, not the next general election, but just down the road. I think there's a certain amount of credibility which is going to be gained and lost in this by-election. And right now, the person who stands to lose the most is François Legault.
James, it's been interesting to see the parties react to the stepping down of Joëlle Bottin, in particular QS saying, she's done a great job. Some people applauding the fact that she's an accomplished woman, and great to see that in politics. And then Marc Tanguay over at the Liberals side saying another sign that Premier Legault has let a talented, hardworking MNA go.
Well, I mean, you could say the same thing about the departure of Dominique Anglade. The only difference is Madame Bottin was not sort of like driven out of the fold with pitchforks from former Liberal MNAs who were publicly criticizing her and undermining her authority as leader of the party. But yeah, I mean, the Liberals are going to have to do what they can. But as I say, there seems to be, how can I put it, a rather cloudy relationship between the Coalition Avenir Québec and women who joined the party. I mean, most of the cabinet departures or cabinet dismissals have involved women. That is a matter of record. And a lot of male cabinet ministers have been given far more slack in terms of being able to drive their ministries into a wall than any female cabinet minister has been in this particular government. But once again, I think the people of Jean Talon, even though they've had to go to the polls basically on average of every 5 years since the last election, since the 2019 by-election, I really think that we may see not necessarily a turn in the road when it comes to the CAQ's fortunes. That's already been happening as the final vestiges of the pandemic disappear, of that state of emergency, and the CAQ emerges as like a gouvernement comme les autres. But how the CAQ treats people within its ranks, how it treats women within its ranks, I guarantee you, and it won't just be us, but there's going to be a lot of talk about this in the future.
James Mennie joins us every day after 5 o'clock. One last quick thing to ask you about, James. The pandemic, is it finally over? Well,
technically it is. The final regulations, which essentially dealt with wearing of face masks in specific situations in healthcare centers, has been lifted. The isolation time has been shortened. But it's so funny because I don't know about you guys, but when I saw the story today about the health ministry's announcement, I had a twinge of nostalgia. For me, the days of lockdowns and that, it seems so very far away. But to a certain extent, the pandemic's never going to be over, because when we talk about the housing crisis in Montreal and can we recycle all those empty buildings downtown, what's the future of downtown Montreal, how people shop, how people travel, how people live their lives has so fundamentally changed over the comparatively tiny span of the last 3 years. I would be very surprised if there are not a few people out there, typing up their doctoral thesis on the socioeconomic fallout of the pandemic, not as a medical issue, but as I say, a social and economic phenomenon. We have changed. I saw a story this morning out of the States that basically suggested Canadians, of all the nations on earth, Canadians are the ones who are working out of their homes the most. And so to say that pandemic officially as a disease is over, God help me, God said that is the case. But in the meantime, the consequences of that, we're only beginning to see them. And I guarantee you, in the next 3 years, we'll probably see as much in the way of fundamental changes of how we do things in our daily lives as we did when the pandemic was actually here.
James Mennie of the Montreal Gazette will talk with you tomorrow.
À demain.
À demain.